It's time for your personal bank show with Ferenc Toth, financial literacy educator and speaker, entrepreneur, and chairman of the board of a bank in formation. Take charge of your financial future with your personal bank. Now, here's Ferenc Toth.
Welcome to the Your Personal Bank Show. I'll tell you what, I've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. I think the biggest thing that I want to really discuss, frankly, is the attack on free speech. And I'm going to talk about this briefly, share a little of my background, again, those of you haven't already heard, and then how this affects your money and retirement and going forward. How is this going to affect us? And there's a lot of ways it's going to affect us, just so you know. Like I said, this is near and dear to my heart, the whole thing about free speech, freedoms in general, all that kind of stuff. Again, for those that you don't know, I'm first-generation American. My name's Ferenc. I'm actually half Hungarian. That's my dad's name. He escaped from the Soviets in '56. I was, of course, born here. So, again, I'm a first-generation American. And the lesson, if you talk to anyone who they lived in or their family heritage was from an oppressed country. How's that? Communism, socialism, you name it, those kinds of things. You get a pretty consistent viewpoint. And what's going on currently, I've got a lot of friends who, are from places like Eastern Europe and things like that actually grew up in. And again, I have family, I have cousins who were old enough to remember the old country, as they put it, before they came to the States. And when you talk to those people, there is a high level of concern. There's a high level of fear about the direction of where our country is going politically. And the biggest thing is they lived it. They saw it. They experienced it. They know, and again, my family heritage, we know what it's like to be in a country where you don't have the freedoms that we have, okay? And so if you want to really understand why this is of such great concern, if you're sitting there saying, well, if you're still one of those on the fence, and unfortunately, or I should say fortunately, I don't think a lot of people are, but if you're still one of those, seriously, talk to somebody who used to live in a communist country and get their viewpoint. It's eye-opening, okay? And this is the sad part of all of it, is this country was founded on the principles of getting rid of an oppressive government. I mean, a history lesson, if those that don't remember, we were under the King of England, okay, as the colonies, and taxation without representation and all those kinds of things were the founding principles of what our country was founded on. This is the whole point, is what I guess I'm saying. America, the United States, became a beacon of hope and freedom and the land of opportunity over the next couple of centuries. I've said this before in previous shows. When people escaped, like my own dad, when they escaped oppressive government regimes and various things, and I don't care if they came from China or they came from Eastern Europe or anywhere else for that matter, okay, in the world, for the most part, where do people escape to? When they're escaping from somewhere and they want more freedom, historically, over the last couple hundred years, think about it a minute. Where did people escape to? They didn't run to Russia. They didn't escape to China. They didn't escape to Europe, Eastern Europe in particular. Some would move from Eastern to Western Europe because there was more freedoms, of course. That's understood. But why are we known as the land of opportunity? Well, the reason's really quite simple, and it goes into the founding basic principles of our country. And that is that too much government is bad. Powerful government is not good. And like I said, these are not radical statements I'm making. If anyone reads the Constitution or you even take a cursory look at the Federalist Papers, anyone who's a citizen of this country, I think, should be required reading. The Federalist Papers, if you haven't read them, and I understand they're pretty there's a lot to them, and there's a lot of language that's, from a couple hundred years ago. So sometimes it can be a bit of a tough read. I get that. But it doesn't take much to see what the founding fathers were coming from, okay, and understand what the founding principles were, okay? There's a book I've recommended this several times. It's called Original Intent. And I think you can still buy it on, I was going to say Amazon. I would encourage you, for those of you who are not happy with how Amazon's been acting recently on the free speech front, look for alternative sources, which is another solution that I see coming that we need to have. But my point is the book Original Intent is an excellent read in terms of helping understand what the original intentions were of the founding fathers. Now, I understand the progressive movement is all about change. It's all about changing, and they don't want what the founding fathers did and stood for. It's about changing that. Now, is that viewpoint right or wrong? I'm not here to say that it is. Some people believe that a lot of things need to change. Some people believe that they don't. Now, am I here to say that the country is perfect? By no means is it perfect. There's always things we can do to improve upon, and we have over the couple of centuries. There's been many areas where we've improved upon the freedoms and who we are as a country, okay? But my point is that's the big divide here what kind of country do we want to live in? Do we want to be in a country where we have, historically speaking, unprecedented freedoms? We're living or have been living in one of the freest societies in human history. And it's created some of the best growth and opportunities, not security. That's the thing. That's a common misunderstanding. We're not a country of security. That's what socialism is about. It's about making sure, more or less, everybody's earning the same and everybody's pretty much taken care of, cradle to grave, health care and things like that. And that's where progressives and things, a lot of their policies and things that they want to change is moving towards. And many of them, like Bernie Sanders, for example, are openly admit it. See, I don't have a problem with somebody like a Bernie Sanders. And the reason I don't is because, at least they're honest about what they're wanting to do. I can deal with that. I can disagree or agree with what they're standing for or their position, but at least they're being basically honest about it. What I don't like is people who use terms to try to hide what they really are. If you're a socialist and you're for socialistic ideas, then just own up to it. And if your ideas aren't popular or not popular enough to get it passed or elected or whatever, then I would challenge you to go into the market of free ideas and, educate people to your ideas. And if you have a winning argument, then that should not be an issue. If you've got to hide behind who you are, what you really stand for, frankly, that should tell you something. Pretty much there's a problem, okay? But again, I'm divesting here. See, what we're seeing today, and again, I'm going to tie this in with our money and retirement and the economy and all those kind of things here in a bit. But what we're seeing here is the biggest challenge, the biggest threat to free speech that I've seen in my lifetime. And here's the problem why this is dangerous. And a lot of people are talking about this and writing about this. Whether it's the left or Democrats or whatever you want to call it, whether they understand this or not, I'm not real sure if they do. But the problem is, what they need to understand is, why did over 70 million people vote for Trump this last election cycle? About half the country. Now, I understand there's some issues about, the count and all that kind of stuff. I'm not getting into that right now at the moment. But the reality is we're a divided country. I don't think anybody disagree with that. And it's roughly half and half. It's hard to say. But the reality is a good percentage. There's a lot of people, over 70 million voters, voted for Trump. Why? Why did they do that? Now, there's a lot of reasons behind it. Maybe they liked his policies or various things. But a big reason why there's so much passion involved with all of that, that both sides need to understand and realize, is because they felt like the government wasn't listening. They didn't feel represented. And that's dangerous because remember, going back to our very founding fathers, our founding documents, all of that. Remember representation or taxation without representation, the Boston Tea Party, things like that, the things that occurred that created this country in the first place for what it is, was because the people didn't feel like they had the freedoms. They didn't feel like they were being listened to. They weren't being represented. And by the way, folks, we're not a democracy. What we are is a representative republic. That's what our government system is. And that entails the folks that we vote to represent us are supposed to listen to the voters' concerns and represent us in the best way they have possible they can do so. That's what the intention was. Now, a lot of people today don't feel like that our representatives, the ones that are elected, are listening to the people, to the general public, or they're only listening to half, not the other half. You know, Biden's been talking about healing and bringing the country together. Well, you know, first thing you got to do is listen to the other side. And instead of saying divisive types of things, you need to find out what the concerns are on the other side and help address those. Now, I don't know that they don't know or they don't care. I don't know what it is. But what we need are, as I stated last week, leaders, not partisans. People that are actually going to lead this country. People that are actually going to be actually what we intended them to be, and that's represent our country, not their own self-serving interests and not their party's interests. You know, whenever there's a vote and it falls completely under party lines, like there's not even one single dissent on it, those kinds of things concern me. Because let's face it, whatever the item is they're voting on, you can't tell me if you've got over 200 representatives, for example, that every single one agrees with that particular law. Let's have some original thought and some opinion, not just be part of a herd. Country first, party second. We're Americans first. And that's what we need. And if somebody would step up and do that, I think we would see a difference. So stay tuned in the next segment. We're going to talk about this further and how this will affect your money, your retirement, and our economy.
For more information on your personal bank, feel free to contact Ference at yourpersonalbank.com. Back to Your Personal Bank Show with Ference Toth.
Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show. And you know, I was talking a lot about the original intention of our country, our founders in the last segment. I'm going to tell you, if you missed it, go to yourpersonalbank.com. You can listen, by the way, to any of the previously recorded shows. We've got about over a year's worth of shows there of content. Talks about your personal bank, current events, and really the focus is we're tying politics and current events and things like that in terms of how it affects our economy, our money, our retirement. And your personal bank, like I said, I didn't talk about it in the first segment at all, but it really is a way of taking control of your money. See, control is an issue here, and it's a problem, and freedom and and attacks on our freedoms. Here's the thing. Not too long ago, this past week, we recognized or celebrated Martin Luther King Day. At least some people did, maybe some didn't, but the reality is that, that's a national holiday. We'll put it that way. Now, here's the thing. There were a lot of great things. He wasn't perfect. No one is, okay? But there were a lot of great things that he shared. And, his I Have a Dream speech is iconic. I have a dream that people will be recognized by the content of their character, not by the color of their skin. And that's awesome. That's awesome stuff, okay? The entire civil rights movement was about people that felt disenfranchised through racism, and they were. People that were excluded, okay? And that was a just cause. We're seeing the same thing, the beginnings of the same thing in terms of an attack on our civil liberties, the right freedom of speech, for example. There are places in this country, there are occupations and careers in this country where you can't come out and say you're a conservative, for example, because you could be banished, lose your jobs, things like that. In fact, what may need to happen, we already have legislation, we have laws in place where you can't discriminate, because of somebody's age or sex or color or religious affiliation, those kinds of things. We may need to add political affiliation to that. I mean, that would be a great place to start if this country wants to start healing and coming together. In other words, just because you have a different political opinion than I do doesn't mean we can't work together. Doesn't mean we can't do business together or operate in the same place of business. We can have discussions. We can be civil. We can agree to disagree. But my point is simple, is when people are getting banished or shut down or any of that kind of stuff, that's not good. That's not good for democracy. That's not good for our country, okay? It's just that simple. Now, what this does is this attack on free speech creates a tremendous challenge and at the same time a tremendous opportunity. One of the things that I like to point out to folks all the time is, look, I was not I've been open with clients. I've been open with people. I was not a big fan of a lot of Trump's tweets in terms of how he communicated his messages. And some of my jokes were sometimes I felt like he was his own worst enemy because, he had a brashness of his approach on how he communicated that frankly turned a lot of people off. And in some cases, that's why there was so enormous vitriol and passion on both sides where people loved him for what he did and people who hated him for how he did it. Okay. So again, it worked, and you need that kind of attitude and thick skin and that New Yorker brash attitude maybe to do what he did. But it also turned a lot of people off. But the thing is this. Personally, I didn't like a lot of the times. I would cringe with some of the things he would say. Oh my gosh, why did he have to say it that way? I agree with what he said maybe, but why did he have to say it that way? Because I knew the pushback that was going to come. It was going to create more problems, create more angst. The thing is, though, that versus shutting him down so he can't communicate at all, that is having him be able to communicate, no matter how bad it is still better. Because at least I knew what he was thinking. I knew what our leader was thinking. And that's a good thing. It's good to know where our elected officials are at on particular issues, rather than just being in the dark. Because when they operate in the dark, well, a lot of bad things can happen, right? So here's where the opportunity is. This attack on free speech is creating, I guess what you would say, some strange bedfellows. And here's what I mean by this. This is a winning coalition. If we can get some politicians and some leaders, not partisans, but leaders, would understand this, that if you focused on free speech and the rights of people, civil rights of people, the civil rights movement was a winning thing. It doesn't need to be violent. The nonviolent approach worked. Take a playbook from the civil rights movement. It worked. Okay? But when you talk about free speech, you just say, look, I'm for free speech. You basically are going to include just about all the conservatives, most of the independents, pretty much all the libertarians, and you're going to even have some classic liberals who still believe in free speech. Now, folks, that's a majority. That's a significant majority, in fact. A recent poll I saw last week showed that in battleground states, something like 75% of voters agreed with free speech and did not like the attacks on free speech. That means you pretty much got all the folks who voted Republican and about half the Democrats. Folks, that's a winning combination. Okay? That's something that majority of us absolutely can agree on. Now, it's also going to create business opportunities. We're already seeing it. When we saw the attack on Parler and things like that, where the social media giants shut them down. And folks, let's be real. They shut him down for more than one reason. They shut him down, of course, they didn't agree with them, okay, politically. I get that, which I think is completely accurate. But they did it for business reasons too. Parler was the number one fastest growing app on the Apple Store and the Google Play Store. They were growing too fast. Like the CEO of Parler himself said, we were growing too fast for the competition. They saw an opportunity to shut us down, so they did. They collaborated. Now there's a lawsuit, and I think they have a really good case. I hope they win. Parler, that is. But the thing is, they're going to shut down the competition. But it shows you, when they have the opportunity to, it shows you that there is a market for that. And we're still a capitalistic country, and I believe there's some people out there that are going to see this opportunity for business and are going to create these alternative methods of communication, like a Parler, for example. Okay, I never heard of them personally. I don't tweet, I don't do that kind of stuff. So I don't really pay a lot of attention to that kind of stuff personally. But when I heard that, Google and all them Amazon were banning Parler, I was curious, like millions of others, and I downloaded it just to check it out to see what it was about. That's some of the best advertising a company like that could ever get. And they're creating their own competition. It's very short-sighted from a business standpoint, but it's creating opportunity. And there are going to be other opportunities like this in the business world where alternatives are going to be created. What was it? Robert Murdoch was asked, why'd you create Fox News? He goes, look, if you're going to create a news channel that appeals to half of Americans, that's a winning financial success story. He's right. So that opportunity is going to come about, and I think we're going to see a lot of that going forward. So, like I said, stay tuned. I'm going to talk about more how these political things can affect the financial situation, the economy, and your money. So stay tuned.
For more information on your personal bank, feel free to contact Ferenc at yourpersonalbank.com. Back to Your Personal Bank Show with Ferenc Toth.
Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show. And I'll tell you what, I've been talking a lot today about free speech, or really more specifically, the unprecedented attacks on free speech we're seeing. I think this is going to have tremendous ramifications for our country, politically, economically. And if you missed it, like I said, go to yourpersonalbank.com. You can listen to any of the previously recorded shows, including the previous segments. I'm going to encourage you to check it out. But like I said, this is creating a strange bedfellow situation where, frankly, some of the polls are showing something along the lines of 75% of folks in battleground states, voters, are very much in favor of free speech and very much against the attacks on it. Folks, you don't need to be conservative if you're a politician or whatever. You're trying to create a business model like Parler or Rumble or those kinds of things. Just be a free speech alternative. You see what that does to me. This is the winning argument. This is the winning play. This is the majority. This is where the other side went too far because our country is and was founded on basically certain rights that we have, freedoms that we have as individuals. I mean, again, go back to the history of the founding of our country. The Constitution was they weren't going to get it passed. And because remember when they put out the Constitutional Convention, they created the Constitution. All this, most majority of the states had to vote for it, to pass it, to ratify it, and they were having troubles with it. And it came back from some of the states that they didn't feel like there were enough freedoms guaranteed. So they created the Bill of Rights, added to it, and that's what got it over the hump, if you will. It got the Constitution ratified. And one of the chief rights in the Bill of Rights is freedom of speech. Period. Our country was founded on this principle. People have fought and died for the last 200 plus years for these principles. See, if we allow this attack on free speech, we're disrespecting every person who went to war and went into battle, and particularly those that gave their lives. I served in the Army. Thankfully, I didn't have to serve. I didn't serve in a war. I didn't have to give my life. But we're disrespecting. If people say we love the troops, okay, show it. Stand up for the freedoms and the rights that the troops fought and died for. Now, I'm not talking about violence. I'm not for violence. I think that was a mistake. The attack on the Capitol. This can be, in fact, I'm a constitutionalist, basically. If you're for the Constitution, there's constitutional ways to do this. And basically what this is we have a war of ideas here. We're in the midst of a war of ideas. Okay? And how do you win those war of ideas? Well, you find ideas that are winning ideas, like protecting free speech. Again, the vast majority of Americans are in favor of that. Just be the free speech candidate. Be the free speech alternative on social media. You will rival Facebook or Google or any of those, I believe, if somebody steps up and does that. I believe that'll happen. We're a capitalistic society. I think opportunities they're presenting themselves. They've created, from a business standpoint, the attack on free speech that Twitter and Google and Apple and Amazon did. I think what they did is they just created their own competition. They opened the door wide open to create competition because I, like many people, given an alternative to purchase, buy things instead of buying them from Amazon. I used to always say, just get it on Amazon or search it on Google or whatever. Well, given an alternative and you give me a free speech alternative, I'm going to take that one because I'm going to support the free speech alternative, not the one that's going to curtail free speech. I don't care what the reason is behind it. I understand there's business reasons behind it, political reasons, but it's not right for the country or the individuals. That's what we stand for. And that's how we fight back. That's one of the ways we fight back and make a difference. See, the key is the areas that need to be addressed are education, media, and the government. How do we fight back on this? That's a question I'm getting. How do we do it and not in a violent way? Well, we've allowed the left, the progressives in particularly, frankly, take over those areas, education, media, and government. Overwhelmingly, studies show over and over again, the people involved in those three areas are 90% plus vote and contribute Democratic. Why? Why have we allowed them to just take that over? What I'm going to say is we need to encourage conservatives, constitutionalists, libertarians to get involved in education, media, and government. Get involved in these areas. Stop sending your kids to public school to get indoctrinated, for example, if you have conservative values. There's online school options. There's homeschooling. There's all kinds of charter schools. Take advantage of those. That's one other way of doing it. In other words, we got to take back this country if we're going to make a difference. So stay tuned in the next segment.
For more information on Your Personal Bank, feel free to contact Ferenc at yourpersonalbank.com. Back to Your Personal Bank Show with Ferenc Toth.
Welcome back to Your Personal Bank Show. We're rounding third, and I know I haven't talked a lot about financial stuff today. I've been pretty fired up about the political situation, and really, most importantly, I believe, the attack on free speech. That's one of our basic civil rights, our basic freedoms as a country, and we really need to look at how do we preserve those benefits, because if we lose our rights as citizens, then we become no different than many other countries and many other governments throughout human history. We've been blessed, frankly, we've been blessed with one of the freest societies in human history. That's just a fact. It's created one of the most robust economies, one of the best situations for most people to live in. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. Can things be improved? Of course they can. But we became known as the land of opportunity. It's not that people are escaping the United States to go to other countries. It was completely the opposite. People are escaping oppression and things like that from other countries to come here, just like my own dad did. He escaped the Soviets in 1956. He from Budapest. I'm half Hungarian. Where did he go to? Where was his dream? And he ended up in the States. Okay? He didn't escape to Russia, okay? He didn't escape to China. He escaped to the United States. And that's the story. That's the thing we need to understand. If we want to honor those people who some risked their lives, like my dad, to get here, to create a better opportunity for themselves and their families going forward. We need to honor that. We don't need to become like all those other countries were, or some of them still are. You know, if we want to honor the troops, the ones that fought and died for freedom, for the right to free speech, for example, we need to fight for this. You know, otherwise we're disrespecting those people. Okay, you know, I've heard many. I served in the Army myself, and I've heard many vets say, "Look, you know, I may not agree with you, but I fought for the right for you to disagree with me." And that's a powerful, powerful concept. We can't lose sight of that. Now, again, from a financial standpoint, economy, and all those kinds of things, this attack on free speech, I believe, is a tremendous opportunity for people who still love this country and want this country to be a land of opportunity, a land of freedom for ourselves and the next generations. All we have to do is all we have to do is agree on a few basic things like free speech. You know, that's a winning combination, okay? I've said this before. So if somebody would be, instead of being a politician, just start being a leader and being a representative and listen to what the majority of the people want, and that is they want to maintain their freedoms. They don't want the government interfering with that. They don't want big tech and things like that interfering with our freedoms, okay? Then that would make a difference. Like I also said, how else can you make a difference? Well, stop supporting organizations and companies and things like that have attacked free speech, right? You know, talking about social media and stuff, as alternatives come about, and I believe they will, okay? The thing is, there's going to be opportunities to support those companies, okay? There's going to be opportunities for investing and stuff like that. Parler, by the way, who got shut down, part of the CEO of Parler, I think he said it best when he said, we were growing too fast. We were the number one app on Apple Store and Google Play Store. And they were becoming a threat. Okay? And they saw an opportunity to take advantage of that and shut them down. So, what do we do going forward? As I stated early in the previous segment, education, media, and the government are the three big areas that we've allowed, because conservatives have allowed the liberals and progressives in particular just to take over, like overwhelmingly. That needs to change. How do you change that with education? Well, if your kids are in public school, as I've done, I have two kids that are in high school. Last year we pulled them out. And by the way, they're doing online school, and both of them are doing so much better in school, learning more stuff. We see what they're actually teaching, and it's just so much better. You need to take advantage of those opportunities. There are charter schools. There's online, there's homeschooling. I understand it's not as convenient. It's easier just to send the kids off to school. But you're not doing yourself or your country any service by allowing your kids to be indoctrinated. By the way, paying for a university, and most universities that are very extremely liberal, the professors and things like that, to work hard to pay for your kids to go to a liberal university, my opinion, makes no sense. Why would I invest my hard-earned dollars and time to send my kids to somewhere that they're going to teach them stuff that I don't believe in? You know, if you do agree in the progressive agenda, by all means, that's your choice. You have that right. It's a free country still to do that. But just to categorically do that without thinking about the long-term consequences of how it's going to affect your kids and our country's future is just not wise. That's a dereliction of duty as a parent, in my opinion, okay? Now, I understand some people disagree with that, but the reality is, what are they teaching your kids? Get involved. Whether they're younger or university age, doesn't matter, okay? Media. There's alternative media showing up all over the place, and that's a good sign. I would call it the legacy media has been losing listenership or viewership or whatever, the newspaper's readership, for quite some time because they're far left of the average American. I don't think anyone can disagree with that. And if you're still supporting that, listening, paying attention to that, my suggestion is stop. I go and look at those occasionally just to see what I want to see what both sides are saying, just so I understand where they're coming from. But I don't sit and listen to it as something that, I take it with a grain of salt. I just want to see what their perspective is. In fact, I do a lot of research and reading and articles and things like that for this radio show. And I've gotten to the point now where I look at who wrote the article, where's it from first, before I read the article, because I want to understand what their bias is, their slant, before I read it, so I can be prepared. In other words, use some discernment. Think, folks, you need to think. Pay attention. And I know I'm preaching to the choir, but you know what? If you can get some other folks and friends and people to not challenge them, not yell at them, not argue, this is a war of ideas. Just get them to think. And by the way, these past several election cycles have been so close. A couple of percentage points here or there. If we got 2 out of 100 people just to rethink their position and what they're doing, that would change elections nationally. It would change the House, the Senate, and it would change the direction of our country. So we don't need to, there doesn't need to be a tremendous change, just a small incremental one to make massive, massive differences. And then government. Look, why does 90% plus of government employees vote Democratic every single cycle, particularly federal? That needs to change. That's not a good representation of our country or government. That's a government against the people. So how do you get involved? Well, state, local, federal levels. There's school boards, there's city councils, there's state, there's federal levels. There's every level of government you can think of, both elected and non-elected, or as a government employee for that matter, to get involved with. And so we need to encourage our young people to get into government service. Maybe it doesn't pay the most. Not everybody has what it cuts to be an entrepreneur. And I'm saying that as an entrepreneur. I've owned 5 different businesses, or 4 businesses, starting a 5th. I'm in the process of starting a bank. Okay, I'm the chairman of the board of a FDIC bank in formation. I've owned a retail business. I've owned a contracting business. I've owned a real estate investment company. Okay, I've owned a service business, the financial services. My wife calls me a Renaissance man, kind of a jack of all trades. So I've got a lot of experience in the business community in the world, and that's where, it has its unique rewards, certainly, but it also has unique challenges, and not everybody's cut out to be a business owner or be an entrepreneur. Maybe that isn't their best course. Find out what somebody's strengths. I always tell people, look, find out what your strengths are, what your passions are, follow that, the money will follow. If you become the best at whatever it is you do, the money will follow. Just follow your passion. It does work, okay? We need to encourage more of our young people to get into areas like education, media, government, and hold on and be rock solid conservative values. Think about it a minute. Can you think of hardly anyone in education and higher education or media, legacy media, we'll put it that way, or in a government position who is a staunch conservative? Can you even think of one? Let's talk about leadership, taking charge of our country and who we are as a country. Now, economically, how does this all affect everything? A lot of ways. If we move more socialistic, which is where a lot of our Democratic leaders who are now in charge have openly stated they want to do, we can kind of look at Western Europe as a model to see where a lot of those kinds of things have gone. Now, I told you I'm half Hungarian. I've spent some time in Europe. I've got some friends. I know people there, so I can speak to this a little bit. Europe is not called the land of opportunity. The United States has been, and for a reason. I was great example. I was talking to this couple from Austria. They've got to know them really, they're great people, and we got talking about various things, what it was like to live in Austria, and they were asking what it was like to live in the U.S. and things like that. And I remember asking him about, what about taxes? I'm just curious. He goes, well, he pays 45% of his income in taxes, and he's in management, sales manager, so better than average job, all that kind of stuff. They live in a small apartment, have one car for their family, no air conditioning. Pretty standard for European standards. And my response was, wow, 45%, that seems really high for somebody. They were making about $100,000 a year equivalent. And he said, well, that's what everyone does. I mean, he just kind of shrugged his shoulders. That's just what everyone does. It's just kind of accepted that roughly half your income goes to the government. And then I prodded them further. I talked to him further, and I said, well, I understand you get cradle-to-grave health care and all that kind of stuff. What other benefits do you get? And he really couldn't name much else off other than, well, the health care. And I said, gosh, we buy our own health care, which they thought was crazy at first. But then I said, think about it a minute. But we keep more of our money. We pay less in taxes, so we can afford to pay for our own. And that just seems like a really, really expensive healthcare policy to me. And I'm an insurance agent. I deal with. I've sold health insurance in the past. I don't anymore. I haven't for years, but I've dealt with it before. And he understood. He's like, you're right, but how do we change it? Because it's been entrenched in their system now for decades. These kind of things are really, really hard to reverse. So how would that affect our money? How would you like to have half of your income basically taken in taxes? I mean, we're approaching those levels for higher income earners in some states like California, New York, for example. And what is that doing to their economies? I mean, anybody been there? Well, I know recently it's hard to travel, but anybody been or know folks that live in California and New York? I mean, they're voting with their feet. They're leaving in droves in record amounts because of the high taxes and ineptitude that's going on. Do we want the do we want that kind of stuff on the federal level imposed on all of us? What's that going to do to our economy and investments and retirement, things like that going forward? I mean, most people don't invest in Europe because it's a great growth opportunity, do they? Okay? The growth opportunity with investments in the markets and things like that we've experienced and been fortunate to experience here would basically likely go away for the most part. That's the kind of thing we're looking forward to as a country if we keep going down the path we're going. So we need to step up, take action, get involved, and let's protect the rights and the freedoms we have as a country. And as always, contact us for more information at yourpersonalbank.com to how to take control of your money and stop being involved with the government rules and system. So stay tuned.
Listen Tuesday at noon and Thursdays at 1 for more information on Your Personal Bank. Contact Ference at yourpersonalbank.com. This show is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information. The presenter and guest on this program do not engage in legal, accounting, or tax advice. Professional advice regarding your situation should be sought if required. Products and riders may have limitations and may not be available in all states. Excessive unpaid loans may affect performance. Distributions may become taxable if not managed properly. Replacements may not be suitable for everyone. There may be charges when replacing coverage. Compare when considering a replacement. Dividend rates and baseline of credit rates may change. Contact yourpersonalbank.com for current rates.